Next, from Chicago, we speak with Mark Wojcik, a law professor with the John Marshall Law School, who talks about what he saw and learned when he found himself in Cairo, Egypt, as that nation was undergoing the most dramatic change in government in the last 50 years. This runs about 10 minutes. Professor Mark Wojcik, you teach law at John Marshall Law School here in Chicago, but more recently you had the opportunity to travel to Egypt, and as everyone is aware, the government there just recently was turned over after some 30 years under Mubarak. Tell us what you were doing there, what was the purpose of the trip, and then maybe we can follow up and get some of your impressions of what you saw.
Sure. I was going to Egypt in January, actually January 26th, which was the second day of the Egyptian revolution that had started. The Facebook revolution, the Twitter revolution had just begun, and I was on my way to go teach a class for Egyptian law professors. Egyptian law professors have classes that might have 300, 1,000 students in a classroom, and we were going to teach them how to make legal education more interactive so that the students would have a better time and people would be able to have a better experience learning the law and learning legal principles. So I'm in my plane on my way to Egypt, and the State Department says, yeah, no problem, everything's going ahead, there's no problems to travel to Egypt. This is a small demonstration, but it'll only last a day or two, because up until this time, demonstrations in Egypt and in other Arab countries were put down so quickly that no one expected anything more than just a brief demonstration by a couple of protesters. But I'm on my way from London to Cairo, and our plane was diverted actually to Athens because of a bomb scare on board, so I wasn't stuck in the Cairo airport where it would have been if we continued on. But the Egyptian revolution continued. President Mubarak was thrown out the following month, and the new Egypt was born, and it's been an amazing year in Tunisia and Egypt and all of the Arab countries where we've seen really heroic people taking charge, embracing democracy, and really recognizing the freedoms that we take for granted. They're just really waking up to those in a new and very, very special way. So I went back in May and in June 2 times to teach classes for Egyptian law professors. We did interactive workshops with law professors from all over Egypt, men and women professors, and tried to teach them ways where they could really involve their students in their own education and kind of bring what we know here to be good educational practices to a country that basically just did lecture and would say, here's my talk, you take notes, and then on the exam you tell me back what I said. And that was kind of the mindset, that you would just listen and repeat and get it right. And we kind of brought in, hey, there are ways to encourage students to think for themselves, to bring collaborative learning, to kind of recognize that you can do things when you're working together. And it wasn't really a democracy building project as such, because it's hard to go into a country and say, hey, we're going to fix all of your problems. But we know that this educational process does have benefits that get people to think more freely, to think for themselves, to encourage them to look outside the norm and to find other ways of looking at the world.
Well, and every country should have the rule of law. Ideally, a lot of investment will not flow unless there is the rule of law, where contracts can be protected and property rights can be protected. But when you were dealing with the citizens, either the professors or students, I'm interested about your impressions. Do they, the fear is that the Muslim Brotherhood will take over and we'll have another country that will not be allied with the United States, that it would be more of an Iran-type state. What were your impressions in talking? Are these people, are the citizens, the average citizens, interested in a more democratic government, or would they be more trending towards an Iran-type state?
Well, they're going through elections right now, and people have been really debating about whether even to participate in the elections. They're not sure if they're legitimate elections, are their votes going to count, what kind of candidates there are, and they realize that if they sit them out, the wrong people will get elected and they won't have any voice. So we've been really heartened in the last weeks to see what kind of progress has been made in the elections. And this is really the first time that anybody in Egypt has had a chance to vote for something meaningful. Now there's problems with the military and not allowing freedom of press, freedom of speech, They're arresting people who post things on Twitter and Facebook and charging them with all kinds of crimes to keep them silenced. And it's my impression that the revolution is certainly not over. It's a continuing process, and it was under Mubarak for such a long time, and now we're in an age of a new Egypt, and there's really a lot of work to be done. It's a time to be engaged. It's a time to go there. It's a time to talk with the people, to communicate with them, to share ideas, to offer assistance of whatever we can that will be meaningful and will help preserve the dialogue that we need to have between our countries.
What's the impression, again, of the average citizen, because you weren't dealing with the government, official government, but with the average citizen, what is their attitude towards the United States?
Well, they really like our current president. He went to Egypt, he went to Cairo University, gave an important speech there, and they really appreciate that part of it. There's problems that people have. Okay, are we responsible for this or that, or what kind of mischief do they think we're causing even if we're not involved? We get blamed for a lot of things. But I was there as an individual, not representing the government, not representing any institution, but just as an individual and dealing with individuals. And on a personal level, there's great friendship, there's great desire to communicate, and I'm still on Facebook and Twitter with all of these guys and women, and we exchange ideas. Even earlier today, I was speaking with people in Egypt about different educational things, and just kind of keeping the dialogue open to see where the future of the country is going. Revolution's not open, and the revolution's not over, and it's really time to be engaged.
To what extent, and I won't take too much more of your time, but when we look at this, why, to the extent that you have gathered any information from talking to the Arab citizens in that region, why is this happening now? And of course we had Gaddafi went down, Syrian leader is under a lot of pressure. We had, what was it, Tunisia, I believe, before?
It started in Tunisia.
So it's been labeled the Arab Spring because it began back in the spring, but what is bringing it about now? Is it technology? Is it the Facebooks? Is it opening up the world vis-a-vis? They're getting word through non-official sources of information. What accounts for this dynamic change in the political equation of the Middle East at this time?
Well, when the events in Tunisia happened, that inspired the Egyptians to say, hey, we can really do that as well. And there were demonstrations planned for police day in Egypt, and the police in Egypt had a bad reputation of extortion, of not really serving as police officers that we would recognize, but of kind of being thugs and throwing their weight around and abusing the rights of people. And from that, we've seen so much happening, but we also see that it's a continuing struggle, and the poor people of Syria that are struggling every day with trying to stay alive in that country. It's really heartbreaking to see what they're risking to have what we have, and what we're hoping that will spread to other countries.
When you were saying you kept in contact vis-a-vis the technologies that are online or available to us all now, what was the reaction of the Egyptians to the fall of Gaddafi?
Well, we talked a lot about that when it was happening, and then they just couldn't believe that it was happening, but also that so much blood was shed in the whole process, and they recognized that a lot of martyrs died in Egypt and Tahrir Square, and that really the cost of these freedoms is a pretty high price for everyone.
As we just close out, looking forward, what is your best guess about how this all shakes out, the political situation, at least in Egypt?
We have to stay tuned, and hopefully the military will recognize that there's a civilian control, that they need to let that process work, and that the country will be better off if people can vote for their leaders, and those leaders can have the powers that the people want them to have.
One last question. Are you going back anytime soon?
No plans right now. It's entirely possible that I could go back next year a couple of times. They tend to call me to come back with 2 or 3 weeks notice and see if I can make it over there. But I'm looking forward to it. And I think when I was there, I remember one of the great signs that I saw on the wall there was support democracy, visit Egypt.
All right, Professor Mark Wojcik, we appreciate it, taking the time to talk with us. And if you go back, let's touch base again on that.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.